All right. So I'm going to share my screen. I do have the chat window open, but it's sometimes hard for me to monitor the chat when I'm screen sharing, but I will try to check in on it. So if you feel comfortable unmuting and asking questions throughout, you're more than welcome to do that. And if you don't, you can put it in the chat and I will be sure to check it periodically so we catch everybody's questions and comments as we go. All right. Let me go ahead and pull up the chat window just in case. Cool. So today we're going to talk about writing your way through graduate school. And my name is Dr. Aubrey Schiavone, and I'm an assistant professor here at the University Writing Program at University of Denver. And in case you're not familiar with it already, I do just want to let you know, like I run these workshops through the University Writing Center at DU. And the University Writing Center works with all University of Denver students, staff, and faculty as part of our sort of mission to create a robust culture of writing on campus at DU. And we believe that all university writers benefit from having conversations about their writing. So that includes from first year undergraduate students all the way through to advanced graduate students and faculty and staff. And we have our biggest service that we provide to the university is that we have 30 peer consultants and you can book a consultation with a consultant at any time. Everything is on Zoom using like Google Docs and other platforms to share and discuss your writing right now. But we do have over 30 peer consultants and they're advanced undergraduates to graduate students and they speak more than 10 languages fluently and have studied in over 30 academic fields and disciplines. So that's just a resource to be aware of that, you know, we're bringing this workshop to you today, but there are a lot of other resources too. And I'll describe those in more detail towards the end of our workshop today as well. Okay. So our agenda today is to have a quick conversation about what writing in graduate school looks like. And I'll introduce 4 major features of graduate student writing. And then I'll also introduce some habits that help to support that writing. Again, I'll introduce resources here on campus at DU and elsewhere that might support you, including resources for using Turabian style in your writing, which is what University College is hoping you will do and requiring you to do. And of course, we'll have time for question and answer throughout and at the end. So I like to begin by giving you a few minutes to reflect on where you're at now. You already have a long history with writing and you already know a lot about writing. So I like to give everyone an opportunity, especially because you may have had a lot of time between when you first did an undergraduate degree to going back to graduate school now. So, or maybe not, maybe it's a lot sooner or more recent for you. So I want to just give you about 4 minutes to write a short paragraph or just some bullet points to yourself, whatever works best for you. To answer the question, how do you anticipate that the writing you do in graduate school will be different from the writing that you did in college as an undergraduate student? Okay. So I'll set like a 4-minute timer and then I'll give us a chance to talk about this. So take about another minute to finish up your thoughts and then we'll talk about this. All right. So, if you feel comfortable, I would love to hear from a few of you on what you had to say about this. So, if you wanted to unmute and jump in, that'd be great. How do you anticipate that the writing you're going to be doing in graduate school will be different from the writing you did in college as an undergraduate or just writing you've done in the past?
Hi, I'm Danny. I guess I'll go first. Well, this is actually my first quarter. So I'm just kind of, as you talked about at the beginning, getting into all of this and trying to absorb all the writing. But I imagine there'll be more research involved than prior. The length of papers will be longer and in essence will require more time to edit once we think the paper is done. Those were some of the things that I touched on in this time period.
Yeah, that's great. So, longer writing or more writing, yeah, more research in that writing and more time to edit and revise, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, thanks, Danny. Other
I had a,
folks?
yeah, I had a couple things that were similar, just requiring more time, drafts and revision. I think with undergrad, I was used to kind of just throwing a paper together and then maybe skimming it or having someone else read it and make some revisions and then call it good. But it's definitely a little bit more intense. This is also my first quarter. I think that it's going to be like just more in-depth topics, just needing more research, needing more time to organize my thoughts and kind of maybe more of an outline format. And then I need help with like less fluffy stuff and more like the grit of the paper. And I find I'm very wordy when I write. So just kind of condensing it and kind of getting to it is my issue.
Yeah, that's great. Condensing for clarity and transparency and being straightforward in the writing, while at the same time grappling with like complex issues and lots of research, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a hard balance. Yeah, good. Thank you. Other folks? Maybe just hear from like one other person. If you'd be willing to unmute and jump in, that'd be great.
Hi, I'm Amanda. I also thought too that the writing I'd be asked more for my own ideas and opinions as opposed to undergraduate. It was very much more like the content, it was the content.
Yeah, absolutely. And depending on the kind of writing you're doing or the genre of writing you're doing, I think that will definitely be true. Like if you're writing like a literature review or an annotated bibliography, then it might be a lot about source material and previous scholarship. But if you're writing something like an argument or I don't know, like a grant proposal or a policy brief, something like that, you will definitely have a lot of your own voice and your own argument to it. And really thinking about how to integrate research in support of your own stance, of your own investigation of a topic. Yeah, that's great. All right. Thank you all so much for sharing. So we've sort of been talking around this and I just want to say it outright. Graduate school writing is a conversation, right? And oops, sorry about that. So we like to use this sort of a metaphor here from Kenneth Burke that's really helpful. We refer to it as the Burkean parlor. So Burke has this bit of writing in his philosophy of literary form from 1941, where he says, imagine that you enter a parlor, you come late. When you arrive, others have long preceded you, and they are engaged in a heated discussion. A discussion too heated for them to pause and tell you exactly what it is about. In fact, the discussion had already begun long before any of them got there, so that no one present is qualified to retrace for you all the steps that had gone before. You listen for a while until you decide that you have caught the tenor of the argument, and then you put in your oar. So this is just like a helpful visual for thinking about writing as a conversation, right? Especially thinking about how to take stock of what's been said before you arrived on the scene and started investigating a topic yourself, right? And thinking about all the work that will be done prior to you thinking and writing about a particular, or after you've done some writing and thinking about a particular topic. So that relationship with other scholars, other researchers, other theorists, other people writing in your field or discipline, that ongoing conversation is really an important component of writing in graduate school that you want to keep in mind as you're working. So in addition to being a conversation, writing in graduate school also involves a lot of analysis, synthesis, and transparency. And I'm going to give some examples of these throughout the workshop today. So this is just a quick intro to them. So analysis is anytime you're taking something and breaking it apart into like smaller, more discrete, sort of separate codified parts. That's analysis, okay? And synthesis is anytime you're putting things together, you know, whether it's different ideas in your own work or different sources, different secondary sources that have been previously published by other authors, or perhaps you're even doing your own primary research and gathering new data and putting together separate points from data. Sometimes you'll be synthesizing together your own ideas with previously published ideas. All of that, anytime you're putting together previously separate ideas or concepts, that we call that synthesis. Okay? And then conversation is, again, making connections, not just within your own work, but to other scholars or theorists or researchers in your field, making connections between your field and other fields, just really developing that ongoing conversation in the ways that sort of Burke describes in that Burkean parlor metaphor. And transparency is showing your work. One of the most important aspects of scholarly work is that, and scholarly research, is that it be replicable by future scholars or even concurrent scholars studying similar topics to you. And transparency is a big part of that. Showing the work that you're drawing on and the work that you're doing so that your audience knows and can sort of trust you, and your arguments are sort of substantiated by having shown where your reasoning is coming from. And then future scholars can also build on that work because you've been transparent about it. Okay? So as a part of those four major concepts, there are definitely some habits that we can develop and cultivate to support those in our writing. So the first important one is note-taking, and then we'll also talk about organizing your reading and research, using a chart or source matrix to create conversations, using discussion boards to practice writing, and talking about your work all along, not just talking about it towards the end of a project or when it might feel finished to you. Okay? And again, I'm going to talk about each of these in depth. So you really want to use reading and note-taking to begin writing. So we might think of reading as separate from writing, but if you're note-taking and reading in a really active, engaged way, you really begin that work of writing even in the reading stage. Okay? And by taking notes as you read and annotating your texts as you read, those texts become less abstract, and your notes, as you get better at it, as you practice it over time, will become more and more interactive, right? And you can sort of start to find your own voice and join a conversation and keep track of your own thoughts and your own reactions, your own analyses as you're reading. Yeah, that conversation that you begin as an active reader really gives you more to say, something to say when it's time to sit down and write. So you feel less like you're starting from scratch, less like you're staring at a blank document, like really you have something to begin from if you've been note-taking all along. So we have some examples here. Here you have sort of a traditional style note-taking where for the most part, you're just summarizing the concepts in something you've read, right? So you have a column here with major points or major themes from something you've read, and then like bullet points or a list here providing important details about those major themes. Okay? But when we talk about double column note taking, we really want to move from doing that summary work to really adding in your own thoughts, your own perspective, your own reactions and standpoint. So when we talk about double column note taking, you have a column here where you keep track of what the text says, and then a column here where you would add on even to what you are thinking about the text as you're reading it and reacting to it. So you can see here when you're summarizing what a text has to say, you might use direct quotes from the text, as you see in this example here at the top, motivational interviewing, okay? And then you might also do some paraphrasing or some extrapolating in your own words, and that's important too. In either case, whether you're direct quoting or paraphrasing, as you're taking notes on something, you want to keep track of the author and also the page number. It will just be much easier later on when you're writing if you've been keeping track of that as you go, okay? And then in your second column, you really want to add on some response or analysis of your own, okay? So you can see here, this is just sort of like your own words, keeping track of what was being said in the text and why that direct quote mattered, right? And then also, this is your reaction. If you're feeling like something is confusing or doesn't really add up or it doesn't match or align with another piece that you've read, you could start doing that as well. And then here, again, sort of evaluating and thinking about moving forward, how you might relate to this text in your own work or in your own writing. Okay. So you want to be, as you're doing double column note taking and practicing it and getting better at it, you want to be moving from really focusing on one text at a time to actually making connections and starting to build conversation between texts. Okay? So you can see in this second column here on this slide in red, we've added connections to other sources on the topic, but then also at the end here to your own work that you might want to do on the topic going forward. So in an example like this, you're really getting that work of analysis of taking a reading and breaking it down further into these sort of discrete parts that are a bit more manageable and easier for you to make sense of, as well as synthesis, where you're making connections to other pieces as well, even in reading and taking notes on one piece, one original piece. I would also note that you're doing that work of transparency already, where you're keeping track of who's saying what and from what authors and in what readings or what texts, so that you can show that later on in your own writing. So if you're note-taking all the time, both summarizing your readings and keeping track of your reactions and thoughts on those readings, it can be a lot to organize and keep track of. So we recommend really using a research or reading organization system or platform, whether it's something you develop for yourself through like a system of folders or files on your computer or notes on your computer, or using a platform like Zotero or RefWorks. So Zotero is a free open source software that's nonprofit developed and good for collecting online sources. It really helps with shareability, syncing and linking URLs or PDFs to database entries. So that's really helpful if you're reading like PDF articles or chapters taken from a book, or just sort of keeping track of your notes in PDF form. And then also you have some sort of like online based texts that live in URLs. It's useful to be able to embed both of those into your Zotero and keep your notes on them there. RefWorks is similar, and it's actually supported by DU Libraries, and DU Libraries has training modules, workshops, and online support as well. And you can always contact a reference librarian to help work through that. So they're very similar, just one is more sort of like more resources at DU for you to take advantage of. I do know that pre-COVID, they were sort of like phasing out RefWorks a little bit at DU libraries. So there might be a new platform to take on as well eventually. But for now, RefWorks I think is a good place to start. So here's just a screen grab of Zotero to give you an idea of like what your options are here. So you can build out folders, whether it's like based on different projects you're working on, or maybe different courses you're taking, or even different like publications you might be pursuing. You can create folders here, and then you can see here where it's like linking to different sources, and whether they're like online or PDF, you can see those being listed here. Okay? And that, again, you're doing that work of transparency, keeping track of the scholars that you've read and the arguments they've made, and what those really important texts are for your projects. So RefWorks is similar, okay? And there's, I'll share these slides and a recording with you after the workshop, and there's links here to all these things as well, so you can get to them easily, okay? And you can see here that this is actually housed through DU, which is great, okay? And again, research librarians offer individual consultations to help you work with RefWorks if that's how you want to do that. And they can help you with finding sources, archiving them on RefWorks, and also evaluating them for credibility and potential value in your work. So on top of note-taking and creating some sort of digital platform or system for yourself to archive all the different things you're reading and writing about, you can also use a chart to help create conversations. I like to think of this as like a source matrix, because you're offering yourself a brief summary and reminder of different sources, and then really making connections and synthesizing between those different sources that you've read. Okay. So you can see here with this example, we have like the author's name, the year the work was published, the thesis or overarching argument from the piece, right? Like the main point or purpose of a piece. Some relevant context that might be useful for thinking about this text going forward. So what's going on in your field around this text and how it sort of came out of your field, or what potential audiences it has in mind, or potential audiences or stakeholders that it might be especially useful for. Okay. A lot of work in graduate school is actually you're reading primary research that other scholars have conducted. So it's really useful to keep track of methods and methodologies from particular pieces, whether it's qualitative research or quantitative research, whether it's text-based analyses, and really getting as specific as you can to the different methods that are used in your field when you're thinking about a text can be really helpful. This is helpful for thinking about not only like how the author themselves build their argument, but it's also helpful for you to go back to later when you're trying to design your own research, your own study, your own writing, and to think about the different methods that you could potentially use as a model for your own work. Okay. And then of course, it's important to keep track of representative quotations as you go. Really something that's going to jog your memory as to what this text was about and what you really connected to in it and what you might want to build on in the future. Keeping track of potential direct quotes from a piece that could go into your own writing when you reference that piece going forward. I'm going to take a second here to try and check the chat, see if anything's come up in the chat. And it doesn't look like there has, so that's good. Okay, cool. Again, when you're building out a source matrix or a chart like this to keep track of those readings that you've been doing and their relationship to your own projects, like you're really doing that work of conversation and showing the connections between pieces. So you may have already noticed, even if you're in your first semester, right, that you have a lot of discussion boards for your classes, especially now when most of our learning and teaching is remote, right? So you're doing a lot of sort of short, I would say sort of like in the moment kind of writing as you're working and on discussion boards. And it can be really important to think of that. Sometimes we might dismiss it as like assignments, or maybe even sometimes it feels like busy work, but I think it's really important to consider those discussion boards as practice for those longer, more intensive pieces of writing that you're going to be doing for your coursework and for your own projects going forward. Okay. So you can see here we have an example of a discussion board, right? And whoops. I wanted to give you a second to read through this and identify any moments of analysis, synthesis, transparency, or conversation. Okay? So take a look at this short excerpt from a discussion and see if you can identify any of those major features of writing as you read. I'll give you like 2 minutes to do that. All right. So you can see here, even in this very beginning of this, you're doing some synthesis work by bringing together separate sources. Okay? And then you're doing some analysis work when this person here brings in a direct quote from Dewey. Okay? Really breaking a whole text down into a more discrete sort of like representative quote and doing some reaction to that quote from the text. Okay? And then when you're sort of taking stock of this connection between the two sources here, you're really doing that work of conversation. And anytime you're including authors' names and sort of page numbers where you are sort of directing other readers to where this source material is, you're doing that important work of transparency. So even though discussion board posts might feel smaller, they really are like a sort of like a microcosm or a jumping off point for some of those major principles and habits you want to develop in your own writing in those for your longer, more intensive pieces of writing. So a fifth important habit is to be talking about your work all along, not just at the end. So we know from research and also from experience, right, that writing is not linear. It's iterative, it's reciprocal, sort of what we might think of as discrete steps, like, reading, gathering source material, brainstorming, outlining, pre-writing, free writing, actually drafting, and then revising, right? Those things aren't actually linear. They sort of flow into one another, and a moment of revision might lead you back to a moment of invention or pre-writing, might lead you to a new idea and sort of begin the cycle in a new place all over again. So because writing is iterative and reciprocal in those ways, it's really important for you to be talking about your work all along. It will help you to start writing to learn, writing to discover new and develop new ideas, not only to communicate your ideas, if you're talking about your writing all along. Okay? So make sure you're talking with your professors and mentors about your writing and about your projects. It's literally their job to meet with you and talk with you, whether it's over Zoom or over email. If you have questions about an assignment or about your progress on that assignment, about some feedback or possible revisions, like talk to your professors about it. Talk about your ideas with others, your classmates, your colleagues in your field, and also folks from other fields as well. It can be really useful to get feedback from a range of folks who might be familiar or less familiar with your projects and with your field. Okay. Try to seek feedback early, again, whether it's from a professor or a mentor, whether it's from a colleague or a peer, or if you want to go to the Writing Center, you can go and seek feedback from someone as early as, I have no idea where to even begin, right? Just, could you talk to me for 20 minutes and be a sounding board and help me figure out where to start? And you could leave a conversation, an early conversation like that, with an outline and a way forward and a sense of what your overall argument might be. Of course, those things will be flexible going forward, but having a conversation about your writing and seeking feedback about your writing can help you to even get started. Okay. Offer feedback to others as well. And that might be a good way to get feedback on your own writing, is to offer to read and give feedback for other people. But that important work of stepping away from your own writing and really turn your critical lens onto someone else's work helps you to then sort of hone those critical senses and sort of return to your own work with a renewed sense of purpose. We can be so close to our own writing that it's difficult for us to critique and revise something we've written ourselves. But if we're practicing giving feedback to others, we can take some principles from that practice of giving feedback and do a better job of reading and revising our own writing. Okay? So offer feedback to others as much as you can as well. There's also an aspect here of rhetorical analysis or rhetorical genre analysis. If you're reading other folks' writing and offering them feedback, you might find things that work well for them that you want to emulate in your own writing or imitate in your own writing. And conversely, like you might find things that you think someone else is not doing well in their own writing that would need some revision or attention to improve it, and that you could then find those things in your own writing and make those revisions in your own writing as well. Of course, go to the Writing Center. As graduate students, you can sometimes feel like that might be more intended, those services might be more intended for undergraduate students. That is not true, right? We love working with graduate student writers. And all writers need to have conversations about their work, need to get feedback about their work, probably especially graduate students, because you're doing so many of those things you all brought up at the beginning of the workshop, like writing longer pieces and incorporating research and bringing your own ideas and arguments to the writing. And it can be really useful to have, another set of eyes on your writing. So make sure you're going to the Writing Center. So these are the 5 habits we've discussed. And I think I made it pretty clear throughout that these are things that you can do even before you begin writing, before you sit down and start drafting something in a document, right? So it's important to keep these in mind as habits that you can start at any point in the writing process for a particular project or assignment. So I want to give you a few minutes to reflect. I've done a lot of talking at you now, and so I want to give you a chance to reflect on some of this and think about what would be most useful. So take another 4 minutes or so and write a short paragraph or a list to yourself. What seems most useful to you so far? How will you apply these habits and concepts to your own writing? And what questions do you still have, particularly about analysis, synthesis, transparency, or conversation? So I'll set a 4-minute timer, and then I'll give you a chance to talk to each other about it. All right. That's 4 minutes. Does anybody want to unmute and sort of share out and talk about it with us? Yeah, what seems useful to you? How might you apply these, or what questions do you have?
I guess I'll go first again. So just quickly, what do I find most useful so far? I really like the idea of practicing on the discussion posts. Um, Coming into this, I've noticed, some of my classmates, like some of their discussions look like little research papers, and I was really surprised. And then when it came my turn to kind of put something up, I was just like, it didn't feel on the same level. So seeing that kind of resonates. It's like, okay, so I just got to practice what I'm going to apply to my papers also in the discussion posts. I also like the idea of double column note taking. I was sort of doing that prior, knowing that I'd have to like note and cite page numbers from wherever I'm gathering my information. But I do like the extra step in the double column note taking. And then the other thing I felt was to create a chart to create a conversation. I hadn't really seen that before. So I think that'll be a great aid in note taking. How will I apply these concepts to my own writing? I just got to practice, I guess. I also want to be able to take, I guess, advantage of the Writing Center. I keep hearing about it, but I haven't really delved into that yet. And then I don't really have any questions about analysis, transparency, or conversation at the moment.
Great. Thank you so much, Danny. Anybody else? Thoughts from this reflection exercise?
Yeah, I think the most useful is again, the double column note taking, and then using charts to create a conversation. Just I've been using like outlines, and I think having the double column note taking seems, I don't know, just organized better. And then I think applying it to my own writing is using the Zotero or the RefWorks just to kind of have a place to keep everything, because with healthcare, I feel like I've been reading so many journal articles, and maybe I'll pull like one sentence or two sentences from that pertains to what I'm writing about. So I feel like that gets lost a lot. So just to have a place that I can store it and maybe make a note of, in this line, this page number, where I could find it. And then I do think that using the discussion board for feedback, I've used that in the past, and I think that that's amazing, just because you do see how other people write and you're like, oh, that sounds amazing. And we'll even comment, like some of the people in our class now we'll just send a message like, that sounded amazing. Or, some people are like, oh, okay, maybe work on this. So that's really good to have an open feedback with classmates. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's great. You're like combining a few of the habits there, right? Using the discussion boards to practice and to give each other feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Anybody else want to jump in?
Yeah, I really like the source matrix. It's a lot of our first quarter, so I'm just collecting a bunch of sources that I haven't had to do before. So being able to just keep note of which ones I like, because as I'm reading and as we're starting these papers, I'm developing a lot of ideas from these sources. And so being able to easily reference them when I need to cite them would be a lot better than having to dig back through the reading and be like, wait, where did I hear that again?
Yeah, that's great. It can be really intimidating as a graduate student to feel like you can like respond to and critique the source material that you're reading, like published scholars. And so I think doing something like the double column note taking or the source matrix really helps you to start sort of like add your own voice into the conversation alongside the summaries that you're writing. Anybody else? Okay, cool. So I do have a quick example here. Let me see what time it is. Oh, actually, we're getting close to our time. So I'm gonna go ahead and talk to you about resources at DU. There is some more detail in the slides about those 4 concepts. So if you wanted like a little bit more detail on those, you can always go back through the slides and check those out when those are available to you. But I do think it's important to talk about resources and how to access them. So we're going to talk about that now. So the University College requires you to use Turabian. And of course, hopefully most of you have this little handy dandy notebook already, the manual for writers here. So some major bullet points, right, is that Turabian author date style generally refers to authors by their last name. You want to include a date in the parentheses immediately after the author's name, okay? And include page numbers for direct quotations or like very specific paraphrases as well, okay? You want to get a hold of that handbook or like a website that can help you work through some of the specific guidelines for format and punctuation, right? Basically, the idea with any citation style is that the more you do it, the more you'll remember it and the better you'll get at it. But also, like, it's not necessarily anyone's job to memorize a particular citation style. You want to have the resources at the ready to be able to check your work and make sure that you're citing properly. But yeah, I think it's more about accessing the formatting and conventions with not necessarily memorizing every little thing, right? So you want to try and keep your quotations to a minimum with Turabian style. Paraphrase and summary are often preferred. And you want to always, anytime you're including references to a particular text, you want to always show the relationship between a quotation and your own work, right? You don't want your source material to overpower your own voice in a piece of writing. You really want to use the source material to help support and substantiate like your own investigation, your own approach to a topic, or your own argument in a piece. Okay? Again, anytime you're doing this work of identifying sources and using specific main points or supporting examples or even direct quotes from a particular piece, you're doing that work of transparency. You're communicating to other scholars where you're getting your information from and where they can go to find that same information. I do want to show you our ePortfolio site here. It has a lot of other resources that you can go to. So you may not know it, but by being a DU student and by being affiliated with the University of Denver, you have a DU portfolio account, okay? And can you all see this website, or are you still seeing the PowerPoint?
Seeing the PowerPoint.
Yeah, just
Okay.
the PowerPoint.
Okay, give me 1 second. Let me reshare my screen. How about now? Good, okay, cool. So this is the University Writing Center's DU portfolio site, okay? And it's just portfolio.du.edu/writing center, okay? And so you can see here, we have right at the front of the page, we have different citation style resources. So if you click on Turabian here, you can click, these are all links. So you can click on different links to help you sort of tease out these things, okay? That's a really useful resource to go to because like I said, with citation styles, the more you do it, the better you'll get at it, but it's not really about memorizing every little punctuation mark, right? It's more about having the resources to check your citations as you go, okay? And then I also wanted to show you while we're here on this site, we do also have like these little folders on the side to help you access things that you might need. So for example, we have one here that's about graduate student writing. So you click into that, okay? And there's like a PDF linked here, and then different resources, whether they're websites or books or recordings here, to help you get at different things you might be doing as a graduate student. So writing a thesis or a dissertation, writing a conference proposal or a conference presentation or a conference paper, right? So we have a lot of those available to you as well on this site. Again, we have this folder on citation practices that you can check out for more detail. And then there's one for particular writing situations that I'm not finding here. Specific writing situations here. Okay. So that might be useful if you're writing an abstract or an annotated bibliography or a literature review or a presentation or a statement of purpose, right? Conference paper. You can click into these folders and get some more links and details about that. If you're trying to sort of unpack a new genre for an assignment or project, all of these resources are housed here on our DU portfolio page. All right. So this document is also linked on that portfolio page, and it's like an example, right, of how to do Turabian style for lots of different texts. Oops, both in text and a bibliography or works cited page as well. Okay. You can also, if you're worried about like sentence level clarity and concision in your writing, or even like paragraph level structure and clarity in your writing, you can get a hold of different style guides. There's a lot of good ones. This one in particular is one that some Writing Center folks recommend. Okay? And it would just help you sort of, after the concern around citation and integrating research, we do still have some concerns in our writing always about clarity and style and sort of sentence level issues. So yeah, pick a style guide that you want to get to know and work through it. It'll help. Of course, we also have individual Writing Center consultations. These are free, interactive, and right now online using Zoom and Google. Eventually, we will have an in-person Writing Center again. And that is housed in Anderson Academic Commons or the library on campus at DU. And it's a great space, and you can make an appointment to come in and talk to a consultant there as well, eventually. But for now, we're doing everything online. And so in addition to our DU portfolio site, we have this more like nuts and bolts, like how to make an appointment website. Okay, so I'll go ahead and share that with you as well. Okay. So you can see here, you just log in and you can access our schedule for a particular week and make yourself a 45-minute consultation appointment. Okay. There's also on the portfolio page, there's a list of our consultants, and you can take a look at that and think about what consultants you might want to work with. Whether it's like someone in your field, someone who is fluent in a particular language, if you want to consult with a graduate student, you can sort of identify all those things through those little profiles, and you can choose who you might want to make an appointment with. Okay. So yeah, this website is more like the how to make a appointment interface, and we also have admins working like a Zoom room at all times. So if you're just like confused about the system or you want to talk to someone as you're making an appointment, you can access that Zoom room and talk to an administrator there as well. And then we also have workshops like the one you're in right now. And I like to let people know that those workshops can be for a group of 3 or more. So that's like you and a few friends, right? So if you have classmates or colleagues or peers who have a similar concern about their writing that you do, and you want to get together and schedule a workshop, you can certainly do that. Okay? It could be about using a certain citation style. It could be about paraphrasing, summarizing, and quoting in your writing, learning to edit and revise your own writing. Okay? Or, if you have a particular genre that you have to write for a class or a project that you're feeling is not especially transparent to you, that you want some more details about. So like a lit review or an annotated bibliography or a grant proposal or a lab report, like whatever it might be, a policy brief. You could put together we can put together a workshop for you on particular genres as well. I do have a question in the chat. What are your thoughts on using the reference tool through Microsoft Word? Jess, can you say more about that, about your question?
Yeah, so I have the Turabian, the manual for writers, and I'll look at it, but when I'm typing in Microsoft Word, there's like a reference tool at the top and it will insert, but it's very limited on like website or journal in an article. So if something isn't on there and then I pick miscellaneous, it's like, it just is wacky. So I don't know. I'm sure a lot of people use that. I mean, when I found out about it, I was like, oh, this is great. But if there's something that's not on there, how would I insert that and then have it show up in my bibliography? Or is that like a IT kind of question?
Yeah, I don't actually use that. So I don't
Okay.
use that feature of Word, so I don't know specifically. But I always say, no matter the citation generator that you're using, whether it's in Word or a website of some kind, like those are suggestions. And I would say that you need to look at the most recent version of your citation style and really edit your in-text citations and your references page with a handbook always, because a lot of times those citation generators don't have the most up-to-date edition either. So
Okay, good to know.
mhm. Yep. All right. Does anyone else have a question right now or something they want to discuss with the group? All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen. At the end of all of our workshops, we invite everyone to do a brief survey. And so I put the link there in the chat. That survey really helps us to refine our offerings and improve our offerings, our workshop offerings and things going forward. So, you could suggest a possible workshop in the for the future, or you could help edit and revise and improve this workshop for future DU students. So yeah, if you have a few minutes, just go ahead and complete the survey. Again, I will make sure to get the slides and the recording out to you all so you have it to reference after the workshop. And yeah, I'll hang around in case anyone has questions. But otherwise, it was great to meet you all and talk with you today about writing.
Thank you, Aubrey. Have a good
Yeah,
one.
good to meet you.
Thank you,
You too.
Aubrey. That was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a good day.
Aubrey.
Yep.